CNBC TV18 ZWork Smart Manufacturing Summit 2024.
Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 ZWork Smart Manufacturing Summit. Our big theme today is providing liquidity for manufacturing growth in India. According to the World Bank, India's domestic credit to the private sector at 55% of GDP in 2020 is remarkably below the world average and lowest among its Asian peers such as China, South Korea and Vietnam. The two primary sources of private debt, bank credit and corporate bond market, could be utilized better in India. So what can be done to increase credit flows to manufacturing and MSMEs? To discuss this, I'm joined by esteemed guest Pulkit Bhandari, the CFO of ZWork, Suresh Khatanhar, Deputy MD of IDBI, Ashok Chandra, Executive Director, Canara Bank, Sameer Patil, CBO of Bombay Stock Exchange. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Pulkit, let me begin by asking you about what is the advantage we have right now when it comes to manufacturing and becoming a bigger player in global supply chains?
When you look at India advantage, when you look at manufacturing, when you look at the global supply chain shifting, okay, so these supply chains were not made in a few years, and of course they'll take a few years to get disrupted again. And we are seeing that disruption today, and this is something which at least we at ZWork feel this is once in a lifetime kind of a shift which we'll see. When you look at the macros and when you look at India, there are few things which are very distinct and stand out from an India perspective. If I were to state all of them, the first would be 19% of world's working population is in India, which is a great advantage. Right? Second, when you look at how the government is basically shaping up the policies, these are things which had never happened before, whether it's PLI, whether it's the government spending on infrastructure and logistics, right, which is going to basically bring the entire MSME, the entire large corporate world much closer to each other, which is something which is happening. When you look at labor cost, we have the cheapest labor cost globally. When you look at tax rates, in India we have the cheapest and the lowest tax rates out there. Just to give you an example, for new manufacturing setups, it's 15%. For the established manufacturing setup, it is 22%. Right? When you look at the large population, so we have a great domestic story as well, which is 1.4 billion people. Again, something which stands out. And if I were to just put all these boxes in place, so whether it's people capital, whether it's financial capital, whether it's political capital, I think we are significantly ahead of any other country globally. And to that extent, I think we are well poised to get to those milestones of 5 trillion and then basically 10 and then going forward from there on sooner than what we expect it to be.
Right. So India is in a sweet spot currently. But Mr. Chandra, if I were to ask you, what can be done to increase flow of credit to the manufacturing sector? Why do you think there are gaps compared to geographies like Vietnam, China, which are really manufacturing for the world on a global scale right now?
Manufacturing sector is totally dependent upon the infrastructure facilities which you are going to provide in the system now. And when I talk about infrastructure, it means I'm talking about the roads, ports, airports, about the power. And I think for the last few years, if you see in India, I think massive investments have been made in the infrastructure. And that creates the good roadmap for the manufacturing activity to come in the system now. And yes, you are right. When we talk about the manufacturing, I think we always talk about the medium or large corporate. But if you see the Indian story, and not about only India, even world over, when Asia Pacific also, if you see, 98% of the industries are in the small and medium sector. Even in India also, the industrial sector, if you see, 98% of the industrial units, they are in the MSME sector. And as out of that, 99% are under the microsystem. So that becomes very, very important when we talk about the manufacturing, how we can galvanize these sectors and bring them in the forefront. That is very, very important. And that is the reason you are saying that a lot of initiatives, the government and the regulators, they have taken it, how we can bring that the revolution in the MSME sector. I think if we bring the revolution in the MSME sector, absolutely, the entire manufacturing sector and entire economy will get activated, and a lot of things are happening as well now.
Right. Mr. Chandra, do you feel that public sector banks really hold the key when it comes to increasing credit to large corporates and small companies, MSMEs?
Absolutely. I think the history itself speaks. If you see the entire infrastructure development which has happened in the country, I think majority is the percentage. If you see, it is all funded by the public sector banks. They play a very, very important role. Not only the infrastructure, even the MSME story which I was talking about, I think there also, I think all the public sector banks are going to play, and they are playing a very, very important role. I will just share certain facts to you. I think MSME sector, a lot of initiatives the public sector banks have taken, starting from the small PM Swanidhi scheme to Mudra scheme, and going forward, I think the Stand Up India and all, these are all towards that bringing the MSME sector in the forefront. Another aspect which I will tell you, where the public sector banks are playing a very, very important role, and is very important from the economy point of view, that is the self-help group. I think this is one sector where we are not talking about much, but a lot of things are happening. I have visited a lot of states, and I have seen that how much activities are happening at the self-help group level. And they also play a very, very important role as far as the small and medium micro manufacturing activities are concerned. We have 12 million SHGs in the country now. And if you say that, take that average, 15 to 20 members are there in every SHGs, I think around 18 crore individuals are part of this self-help group. And these are all mostly, it has been funded by the public sector banks. So public sector banks are playing a very, very important role in the entire the manufacturing and the credit activity happening in the country.
Let me get Mr. Suresh Katanhar at this point. Mr. Suresh, I'd like to ask you, when we speak about manufacturing, yes, we have shown resilience, we've shown growth after COVID-19 pandemic, and despite the Ukraine-Russia war as well, India continues to be in a strong spot. But when we speak about sustained manufacturing growth over the next 10-year horizon, what do we need from that?
I think for manufacturing to grow, we need to look at the basic and the macro changes also, which we have to bring in. I think India has to also grow the investment in the modern technologies, which is also very critical for developing the efficiencies and also the unlocking the potentials of the country, which has been discussed so far. The productivity and efficiency will bring in lot of revenues and the benefits for the manufacturing. One area, although we have a good workforce, but I think the skill sets also matter a lot. I think all these pieces have to be put together to have a better growth of the manufacturing.
Right. Mr. Katanhar, we'd also speak about MSMEs. MSMEs are the backbone of the Indian manufacturing sector, but there is a big credit gap there as well. When it comes to MSMEs accessing loans in the market, what are some of the challenges that you see for them? And why do you think the banks are maybe hesitant to open up credit lines to them in a big way? What are some of the roadblocks that you see for greater credit flows to MSMEs?
2-3 things which comes to mind is essentially is the one is capital requirement, which is lower, and the skin in the game is the one credit requirement for the bankers which they look for. The other is the financial discipline and the record keeping and those areas. The third is the marketing activities, which has to be integrated into the system. The fourth, which comes to that, they have to also adopt the more robust technological innovations, whereby they are able to improve the operational efficiencies and also unlock their potential. Fifth, which comes to my mind, is the managing the working capital cycles, managing their receivables properly. All this will help to improve the efficiencies of the MSMEs, and that will improve the confidence of the bankers. But bankers have become more proactive. Nowadays, if you see, bankers have adopted digital underwriting, whereby the returns from the GST, cash flow lending, cash flow based lending has started. And there are various products which have been developed by the bankers, like supply chain financing, vendor financing. All these are helping to grow the MSME funding. One figure says that last 1.5 years, there is a growth of 30% lending to the MSMEs. So I think it is on a right track and it will improve further with the all initiatives of the government. Which government has taken.
Mr. Patil, coming to you, when it comes to growing India's manufacturing footprint domestically and through exports, what do you think Indian companies, manufacturers need to do for the future?
They need to clearly assign their goals. They need to understand their growth potential, and if they understand their growth potential, what they need to also understand is the capital requirement for that. Are they adequately fixed with their capital? If no, then they should be looking forward for that. And if the simplest way for doing that is come forward, list yourself on the exchanges and raise some capital for that.
Right. Of course, listing is a way to access capital from the markets, but from your experience, what are some of the guardrails that are needed to become a larger player or a trustworthy player in the stock markets as well as a manufacturer?
Trust is the most important factor. You build the trust not only from the lenders, the borrowers, the banks, from all institutions, and then you have done it.
Pulkit, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. How do you see the PLI schemes? A lot has been written about these 13, 14 PLI schemes that we have. There are more on the anvil, but they are for a limited period of time. What role will they play in encouraging the manufacturing sector?
PLI is one of the various incentive initiatives that are out there in order to basically help the entire MSME and overall manufacturing growth. When you look at PLI, I think what it does is it makes the cost structure more efficient, right? With certain incentives which come to a manufacturer, the cost structure becomes efficient. He is able to pass some of that cost structure to his customer, some of those basically benefits and incentives to his supplier, right? So it's not just that there is one individual entity which is getting impacted. What is being done via this particular incentive is there's a larger ecosystem and engine which is going to get moving, right? There's a demand which we basically already know and aware of, whether it's export demand or it's the domestic demand, which is what a PLI manufacturer will kind of tap into. And there's a cost structure which is becoming more competitive. It was already competitive versus so many other countries globally. It is going to become more competitive from here on, which is a great advantage, which also basically means better profitability at these MSMEs and these manufacturers, which basically means that they'll be more bankable, right? So that's one aspect of it. Now, what PLI is, just to give you some numbers and stats there, when you look at semiconductors, it's 760 billion rupees of PLI which is going to get distributed. Just imagine what it will do to the corporations who are doing it, and also the entire MSME infrastructure which is going to get created just because of that, right? A large scale electronics will see $410 billion rupees of PLI being distributed, right? Number of applications which have got approved is close to 733, and MSME applications within that part is 176. So these are massive numbers. The kind of incremental sales that PLI is going to kind of generate is 6.75 trillion rupees, right? The kind of exports that PLI is going to generate is rupees 2.56 trillion, which is, again, these are big numbers, right? And these big numbers will translate into like a massive engine which is going to get moving. And I think, again, extremely bullish about the manufacturing theme that India is going to present, not just to India, but to the world.
You know, because we have two major bankers here, one from the private sector, one from the public sector. Could you give us a sense of, because you have first-hand experience dealing with your MSME partners,
right?
Do you see them facing certain challenges when it comes to accessing loans, something that banks can help them overcome? Maybe that needs regulatory intervention?
Yeah, So I think when it comes to hand-holding MSMEs, it is not limited to banks. It is I think wider. I would say stakeholders who have to come together, whether it's the customer, whether it's corporates like Zetwork, whether it's other large corporates who have been there for many decades, and also of course banking ecosystem, right? So they all have to come together to basically get this moving. Where MSMEs struggle is ability to kind of forecast, right? So they are very astute businessmen because they are doing it day in, day out. Very careful in terms of the kind of risk that they want to take. But at the same time, the moment they start thinking about growth, their ability to forecast is limited. What it does is that there's always a gap between how they set up the infrastructure and how the demand flows in. I think that's where we need to handhold them and help them as much as we can.
Right.
The secondary aspect is their ability to manage working capital is always tricky because they are more than happy to do business. At the same time, their ability to kind of collect those receivables, sometimes there's a lag. I think that's again one area where we need to help them.
Right.
Record keeping. Their focus on basically closing out books, filing for compliances, considering how we have kind of grown as a country on those parameters. I think that's again one area where we need to help them. What we are doing at Zetwork is kind of trying to bring technology to their forefront, to their doorstep. And kind of getting them to understand how they can use that element to address some of these issues that they are facing,
Right.
and become significantly more bankable.
Okay. On that note, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. This discussion continues on the other side.
CNBC TV 18 Zetwork Smart Manufacturing Summit 2024. CNBC TV 18 Zetwork Smart Manufacturing Summit 2024.
Welcome back. You are watching the CNBC TV 18 Zetwork Smart Manufacturing Summit 2024, and we're discussing the theme providing liquidity for manufacturing growth in India. Let me go across to Mr. Ashok Chandra now. Mr. Chandra, the RBI has set up a committee to look at issues being faced by the MSMEs in the country. Now, the Deputy Governor of the RBI has called for a concerted approach by all stakeholders. What do you think has been lacking in terms of a whole of government approach to supporting MSME so far, according to you?
See, I was just mentioning some figures about the MSME sector, where I mentioned about 99% of the industries which are operating in India is from the MSME sector. But if you go in deep, you will find that out of this, 97% of those units are under the unorganized sector now. So that is the in fact the biggest challenge. How we can bring them to the banking system and provide the banking funding channel to these people. I think there a lot of activities are happening, and all the banks and financial institutions are also playing the big role now. And that is the biggest challenge which I see now for the MSME growth. I think if the entire banking system, financial system, if they work together and initiating the digital lending platform, digital training, skill development set, I think if we start working together, I think definitely to a great extent we can bring them in the banking channel. And definitely once they come in the banking channel, I think definitely they can take the advantage of the entire credit flow.
Mr. Suresh, I'd like to ask you about certain sectors within manufacturing that you would be most bullish about when it comes to lending and also growth prospects.
I think the automotive sector, automotive and automotive components, is a sector which is gaining more traction. That is also because of the automotive mission plan which has been adopted by the government. The second is pharmaceutical. I think India is the largest exporter of the pharmaceutical, and it's growing. Production is growing about 50%. The third which comes to my mind is the food processing. I think food processing will gain more traction with government setting up about 135 integrated mega food parks, 7 already operational. The next which comes to mind is electronic systems and manufacturing. And on the core sectors, I think cement, and with so much infrastructure boom coming and infrastructure spending coming from the government and also the private sector, cement is associated. One sector which is really doing good and shining from the export angle is the defense manufacturing. I think these are the few sectors I think where the good demand is coming, and they are the sunrise.
Mr. Patil, coming to you, if we look at the global example right now, which are some of the sectors where you feel there will be immense growth in manufacturing over the next 5 to 10 year horizon?
I think EVs, that is, I think, the most important growth phase that I look forward in the next couple of years at least.
Right. Anything which you feel that really differentiates Indian manufacturers from the world?
Technology. We need to adequately upgrade ourselves to the newest technology and be self-resilient on it, and move on to be more tech savvy to see the next growth phase.
Right. Final thoughts from you, Pulkit. How important do you think is ESG compliance now? Also, at a time when you're looking to tap markets in Europe as well, making sure that products you're making from the very beginning, every manufacturing process complies with global norms. How important is this, and how are you handholding the MSMEs that you work with?
This is a very, very critical topic, and specifically basically how the world is moving and how the world is thinking about this concept of ESG stroke sustainability. Our view is that basically it started as an option a few years back, but today it is something which is it is a must rather than an option, right? And that's where we are heading. When we look at the global supply chain, when we look at global customers, sustainability is something which is mandatory in terms of how they look at their products, right? And from that perspective, working with these MSMEs to basically get those practices inculcated in them early on is becoming more and more critical. The good thing is that we have time, and I think at ZWork we are trying to basically see how we can handhold them and kind of get them to understand the constructs and importance of this. Today, there is no significant premium that is attached to the ESG products, but over a period of time, and as I say, this will be far sooner than what we all anticipate. This will become a necessity, and there will be a certain amount of premium as well in terms of pricing which will come through. That's one part. The other thing is how the entire ecosystem around sustainability is developing is very fast, whether it's public markets, whether it's debt markets, whether it's customers, vendors, whether it's rating agencies, whether it's global debt market and global bonds. Everyone is looking at this concept, and this becomes equally critical, not just at our level, but even at the MSME level. Somewhere we feel technology, which is where our edge is, will be able to kind of help our MSME partners implement this in a very, very successful way. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Pulkit. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us, taking out time, sharing your thoughts and perspectives on manufacturing growth in India. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Many thanks for watching.
CNBC TV 18 ZWork Smart Manufacturing Summit 2024.